Welcome, ghouls. I'm so excited you've joined us. This is our very first case episode for Shrouded in Darkness. Of course, I'm your true crime host, Marlena. And as always, I'll start with my disclosure. All the stories I share contain material that I have personally researched. Some episodes may contain disturbing material. This is true crime after all. And along with what I have researched, I'll also share my own thoughts and opinions on the case. Please understand that it is not our intention to offend or upset anyone. We're here to educate, discuss, and hopefully bring fresh light to cases. When I am able to, I will bring attention to the victims because those are the names that should always be remembered. Today, we're diving into an Arkansas double homicide from 2021. This case is still open. Despite how much is known, evidence truly is everything when it comes to conviction, and this case is a perfect example of that. So here's what we know. The date is November 30th, 2021, and we find ourselves in Madison County, Arkansas. Our suspect, Jeffrey Ryan Kelly, leaves his home around midnight. Super odd time, by the way. He visits nearby residents that's less than half a mile away. And this is where we find our unsuspecting victims. We find Michael Gilman, aged 46, and Lori Newman, aged 49. On this night, 2 lives end at the hands of another. Michael is shot twice in his chest, while Lori gets 1 shot to her head and 2 to her chest. According to our witness, Katrina Barnhart, the suspect returns home and tells her they have a, quote, mess to clean up, end quote. It isn't until weeks later that the victims are discovered when a 911 call is placed. Now, there aren't actually that many details on the call itself. One report does state that the suspect is the very one that actually calls 911, which I don't know how true that is, but it's kind of crazy. Well, regarding the witness's testimony, this is back to Katrina Barnhart. She claims she is told what happens, during the murders, the whole scene, but she paints the picture so well, so vividly, that it's kind of hard to believe she wasn't there herself. Unfortunately, though, as the trial date approaches, the witness recants her story. She refuses to testify. The detectives are forced to drop the charges. Yes, drop the charges of a murder case because there's not enough evidence now. The testimony alone would have sealed the guilty verdict. If they chose to proceed with a trial, if they ended up getting a guilty verdict, or rather not guilty verdict, there would be nothing else that they could do. There's a double jeopardy principle, meaning double jeopardy prevents a person from being tried twice for the same crime, whether they're acquitted or convicted. Okay, so here's a quick backstory. When we first learn about the homicide, our suspect is in a Georgia prison for unrelated charges. But after his release, he and the witness get married. This happens in March of 2025. And of course, this seals the fate of that criminalizing testimony due to spousal testimonial privilege. Meaning now that they're married, she can't be forced to testify. But in an interesting turn of events, because of her recanting and changing her story, refusing to testify, even offering to give up a random person's name that has nothing to do with it, the witness is now in prison. At one point, she was even offered immunity, but she still refuses to testify. She would rather go to prison herself than testify against her husband. So despite everything that we know, she chooses to remain quiet. And in turn, she is sentenced to 10 years for hindering apprehension of prosecution. Okay, here's another backstory. This brings us to the possible motive. The victims, Michael and Lori, are cousins to the witness's ex-boyfriend. So his name is James Lowe. So this means James and Katrina used to date. And James is cousins to the people that were killed. So keep him in mind for later. Well, at the time that James and Katrina are together, the 2 couples were known to be swingers. Yes, you heard that correctly. the two couples, that some were related. And we're going to try not to think too much about that part. Well, when Jeff comes into the picture, later on, obviously, Katrina falls head over heels for him. But to her dismay, he is not interested in the swinger lifestyle. He wants nothing to do with it. So maybe this means it's time for Michael and Lori to go. Maybe this was the actual motive behind the double homicide. She needed to be rid of that part of her life. We may never know. So here are a few interesting facts. About 3 weeks prior to the discovery of the crime scene, a friend of Lori's reaches out to the local police about doing a welfare check. But instead of sending a unit to the residence, which is what should have been done, the sheriff's office opts to just call up a neighbor. And the neighbor, without hesitation, says, "Oh, the couple's fine. They're alive and well." Well, by this point, I'm sure you know that this is not true. Now, remember the ex we mentioned before, James. The murder weapon, the gun that was used in the homicide, is found in his truck. The detectives actually receive a tip about its location, but it's kind of obvious that it was planted there, so the blame would be focused elsewhere. Well, unfortunately, because of the evidence being obviously tampered with, it can't be officially tied back to the suspect. Another interesting fact about the gun, the registration leads nowhere because the firearm was reported stolen several years prior. And I can't go into too many details. I mean, the case is still open. But let me just say that the knowledge we have on this specific gun directly links it to the suspect and the witness, primarily the witness. So if you listen to the Shrouded in Darkness trailer, then you know that this first case hits close to home. And here's why. This case is actually what pushed me to start this podcast. I felt that this case was not going to be well known, that our victims were not going to get the, weird word to say, publicity that they deserve. So I wanted people to hear about this. I wanted people to know about this case. Well, the witness, Katrina Barnhart, is my husband's sister, meaning she's my sister-in-law. And the nearby neighbor that said Michael and Lori were fine and well, that's my husband's father. They all live right there in that same area together. Katrina and Jeff's home, my father-in-law's home, and Michael and Lori's home. They're all within walking distance. I can't tell you how thankful I am that my husband is night and day from his family, and that he's also willing to put up with my true crime obsession. He actually encouraged me to start this podcast. We've actually been working pretty close with the detectives. They have been amazing and great and cooperative because we want whoever's involved to be behind bars, even if it's family. Justice should be served. It's a crazy case, right? And just think, you heard it here first on Shrouded in Darkness. If you have any details worth sharing, please reach out. You can reach out to the local police in Madison County, Arkansas. You're welcome to message me and I'll connect you to the right people. And normally this is where I would share my sources. I would share where I got my research. But with this case, it's a little different because the knowledge comes firsthand. We're very close to this case, unfortunately. But I will respect the privacy of people that are involved. I'm not going to mention any names. It is an ongoing case. We don't want to damage anything. But if you are curious, if you want any more information, you can simply go through local websites for there. That's like the Madison County Record. Their local newspapers, those kind of things will have more information. Now, I would love to hear your thoughts. You can connect with us on social media. We're at Shrouded in Darkness. And don't forget to share your feedback. Let us hear your show ideas. Ask your questions. We want to hear from you. Catch next week's show where we're going to dive into the case of the giggling granny. Thank you so much for being here. Until next time.